So I want to show you how to throw the lid for a jar. For the actual throwing of the jar, it really doesn't matter. So what I've done here is I just, with 1.5 pounds of clay, just threw kind of a sphere, gave it a little bit of a belly. When you go to create your jar though, if you are going to make a lid that's going to go on top, something I've learned is you want that rim to be nice, not necessarily thick, but you want to have a nice stout top lip. If it's really pinched really thin, it tends to chip over time. So what I've done here, just a nice little bulbous form. Doesn't have to be super fancy, but that rim is really important. You also either want it to come straight up or just a little bit in. I found that since we're going to do what we call an overhanging lid, if it flares out a little bit, it's hard to get that lid to sit just right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a measurement. So what I have here are called calipers. Okay, these are fancy ones. They're called a lid master caliper. And what this does is it helps you take an accurate measurement from one piece to the other without having to drag out a ruler. And it's a good way to measure diameter in the middle of a piece. For this, we're going to be using the top. Okay, so it's easy. So the first measurement I want to take is the across, the full across of my lid. So what I'm going to do is find the very center as I'm looking straight down on it and kind of squeeze these in. Okay. And that's going to show me how big to make my disc when I go to throw it on the wheel. So that's the first step. That's the first measurement. So I'm going to set this off to the side, so it's kind of out of the way. I've got not very much clay, probably about 8 to 10 ounces, because I don't need a huge lid. Like I said, we're not doing a dome lid. We're just doing a flat lid with a raised key, so it fits as an overhang lid. So give it some extra love there. Give it a nice spin. We're going to center it as we would anything else. Inward pressure, downward pressure, kind of into a small mound. Now, what I have to do is I need to get a disc this size. So, right now, it's not quite there. So what I have to do is I'm just going to flatten it. Now, you can't just flatten it. You have to have this little bit of resistance still there, because otherwise it'll kind of come off center. So I keep these handy. I don't throw them away forever. So that's pretty dead on. I was lucky there. So sometimes you might have to adjust what you're doing. So you might have to push in a little bit, might have to push down a little bit. Now all I want is this little raised key. So the first thing I'm going to do is dive and open. But try to keep that foot right there. Try not to stretch it beyond that. So I just want a little bit of a hollowness to the lid. So with a little bit of water in the middle, I'm going to dive down just a little bit. Okay, and then this is, it's a long way to open, so we might have to use several fingers here, and just go gradually. And try to go straight across as you open. And I'm going to go till it's about 1 inch to 3/4 over here. Okay, now that kind of like rolled up on me a little bit. I'm going to kind of flatten that down. I don't really want that clay. Okay, that's not going to be strong enough for a key. So you can also open with your sponge if you find that the clay keeps getting drier and drier. Okay, so just that little dip to make the lid nice and hollow underneath. And I can use my sponge to level it out. Now I am going to double check, did I push it kind of beyond my means? Just the tiniest little bit. So all I have to do here, just push it back into check from the outside. Because I want my lid to be somewhat flush with the exterior of my piece over here. Now it is okay if the lid sticks out just a little bit, but it shouldn't stick out like 1.5 inches. That's mildly ridiculous. And then this is where it gets, this is where I have to take my next measurement. So I've got kind of an open piece. The outside is roughly the same size as the outside of this, maybe a little larger. But my next measurement that I have to take is the interior of my piece. I'm going to try to set this here without. So this is where we're going to use both sides of the caliper. So for an overhanging lid, I'm going to take this part right here, and I'm going to fit it down inside. So you squeeze it first, so you don't ruin your rim, and put it inside. And I want to get it so it just barely comes into contact with my rim. And I check it in a few spots just to make sure. So this is going to fit down inside. Okay? And that's how you know you're going to get a really tight fitting lid. No loosey-gooseys. Okay? So what happens here is this part fits on the inside of my jar. The outside of this is the exact same size as the inside of this. Pretty fancy invention. So what I have to do now is I need to raise a key that fits in between these two prongs. So so that way my key will go down inside my jar and work on my piece here. Okay. So the trick here, I find the easiest way to do it is get your little L rib. Give it a nice medium speed. Okay. And all I'm going to do here, and hopefully I didn't over open here. Okay. All I'm going to do here is shave. Because I want this key, I want a nice flat section here, and I want a nice straight up and down section here. Now you can see it kind of, the clay had to go somewhere, so it went out. So I can just shave that off. Okay. Now you kind of have that little bit of a lip there. I'm not a huge fan of that. You're welcome to keep it. You want to make sure it's a good lip though. You don't want to make it too skinny, because that'll cause the lid not to fit. Which is the whole point, is we want lids that fit. So for a lot of this, creating a lid, I just shave. So, or you can compress the clay same way. Okay, so I've got outside, ledge, key up. Doesn't have to be super big. You want a little bit of depth to it. Doesn't have to be crazy big. Because this isn't a picture, we don't have to do a crazy little key. It's just going to sit flat on the table there. So let's do our measurement. Let's check. So this should fit comfortably, because this fits comfortably. So this should fit comfortably around. Now all the way down too. So I can see it's not quite there. So I'm going to come back in with my L rib, and I'm going to shave a little bit more. Now you could shave it, or another trick is just with a really wet finger or with your sponge. Just push the key in. But see how that kind of slants a bit? So I still want that straightness to it so that it fits down in the container. There we go. Now I can slide that all the way down. I know it's going to be a very comfortable key. So I kind of round the key out just so it's nice and soft, nothing super sharp. Okay. And I kind of soften that edge there. Now I usually do one more time, measure twice, cut once, or in this case, measure 50 times and form it once. Then I want to do one more time, measure the outside of my jar over here, okay, and measure the outside of my lid. So my lid kind of got a little bit bigger, but I'm okay with a little bit of overhang there. And at this point, I take my wire, run it under my lid, and I'm going to put that in storage. Okay, lift the bat up. Just kind of a couple quick words. The best thing you can do is throw the jar and the lid on the same day. Because if you throw the jar, remember clay shrinks a little bit when it dries, 5% between wet and bone dry. So if you try to throw the jar one day and it happens to shrink, and then you go to try to throw the lid, your measurements will be off. So you want to make sure they're at the same moisture level, same brick of clay even, when you go to throw, so that they are, they're going to be really super consistent when they dry. And that's how you throw a lid.